He adopted three little girls and raised them as sisters. But on the edge of adulthood, a truth surfaced that changed everything. Stay until the end, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. The town of Cedar Brook wasn't the kind of place that made headlines. Life moved slowly there. Neighbors shared lawnmowers, grocery clerks knew your name, and the biggest news was usually when someone's cat came home after a week away. It was in this quiet corner of North Carolina that Jonathan Hale, a 38-year-old contractor with calloused hands and a tired smile, decided his life needed something more. He had a good job, a modest home on the edge of town, and a reputation for being decent, reliable, and always willing to help fix a neighbor's roof. But the silence in his home had become deafening. He had no family of his own, no partner, and no one waiting for him at the end of the day. He wasn't the kind of man who said much about his feelings, but deep inside he knew. He wanted to be a father. That longing became impossible to ignore the day he received a call from a social worker he'd spoken with months earlier about potential foster opportunities. Her voice was rushed, serious. There were three infant girls, all under a year old. Sisters, or at least believed to be. Their mother was out of the picture. Substance abuse, legal troubles, abandonment. They had no one else. If no one stepped up, they'd be placed in separate foster homes. Jonathan's heart clenched. He asked for a photo. The email came with a simple subject line: Layla, Jasmine, and Sierra. He opened it and froze. Three small black girls, bundled in pastel onesies, staring up at the camera with wide, uncertain eyes. Layla was smiling. Jasmine had her fingers in her mouth. Sierra, serious, observant, looked straight into the lens like she already knew life could be cruel. Something shifted in Jonathan. He wasn't rich, he wasn't a saint, but he knew in his bones. He couldn't let them be separated. The paperwork was a mountain. Background checks, interviews, home visits, financial assessments. Every step brought doubt. Was he enough? Was he capable? But he pushed through. Weeks turned into months. And then one gray morning, he stood on the front porch of his house, holding three car seats with three sleepy babies inside. His home wasn't ready. The second bedroom barely fit two cribs. He gave up his office, turning it into a nursery. His bed was pushed into the living room where he slept on a fold-out cot between late-night feedings and diaper changes. The days were chaotic, filled with crying, formula, teething, tiny socks lost in the wash, and endless laundry. But in the midst of the exhaustion, there were moments, tiny, shining moments, that told him he had made the right choice. Layla, the eldest, was the loudest and the happiest. Her laugh echoed through the house, especially when Jonathan bounced her on his knee. Jasmine was sensitive, prone to tears and clinging to Jonathan's shirt like a lifeline. Sierra rarely cried, rarely smiled. She observed everything, from the ceiling fan to the way Jonathan's hands moved when he rocked the others to sleep. She was quiet but never detached. Jonathan gave them everything he had. He learned how to braid hair, how to calm nightmares, how to cook 3 dinners at once. He sang lullabies in a voice that cracked. He taught them sign language before they could speak. On their first birthdays, he baked 3 separate cakes with their names written in frosting and invited every neighbor on the street to celebrate. He loved them equally, fiercely, unconditionally. But he also carried a secret. When he adopted them, the agency had disclosed that their files were incomplete. There were rumors the girls didn't all share the same father. The birth mother's information was sketchy. Multiple last names, arrest records, and a long history with child services. DNA testing had never been completed, and the records were vague, as if pieced together in a rush. Jonathan asked questions, but answers were limited. What he knew was this: they were 3 vulnerable babies, surrendered together, and if no one had taken them, they would have been separated forever. So he said yes, and he promised himself that no matter what biology said, he would raise them as sisters. They would never feel divided. As the years passed, that promise shaped everything. Layla grew into a bundle of motion. She ran before she walked, climbed before she crawled. By age 6, she could outrun most boys in her grade. Jasmine discovered coloring books and never looked back. Her hands were always smudged with marker or crayon. She loved to draw people, their family mostly, always with Jonathan in the center, smiling wide. Sierra read constantly. By age 9, she had devoured every book in the local library's kids section and moved on to the young adult shelf. She never needed much, just a quiet corner and a flashlight. The girls were as different as the sun, the moon, and the tide, but together they were magic. Cedar Brook took notice. People who had once questioned Jonathan's decision came to admire it. The town loved the Hale girls, 3 smart, kind, spirited black girls who lit up the school plays, won spelling bees, organized bake sales, and always looked out for each other. To everyone, they were triplets. Jonathan never corrected that assumption. Why would he? In every way that mattered, they were. High school brought new challenges. Layla made varsity track as a sophomore and broke school records. Jasmine won first place in a statewide art contest and began dreaming of art school in New York. Sierra joined the debate team and shocked teachers with her razor-sharp arguments and brilliant mind. Jonathan showed up to every meet, every show, every parent-teacher night. He packed their lunches, folded their laundry, and drove them to every sleepover and late-night pickup. The girls called him Dad with affection and pride. They never asked about their birth parents, and Jonathan never brought it up. He feared what the truth might do. As they neared their 18th birthdays, Jonathan found himself caught between pride and fear. He had raised 3 daughters, strong, beautiful, kind, but he still carried the secret. A part of him thought, maybe they'll never need to know. Maybe the truth won't matter. But fate had other plans, because in just a few weeks, the foundation he'd built, so carefully, so lovingly, was about to crack, and nothing would ever be the same again. It began quietly, so quietly that Jonathan almost missed it. At first, Layla just seemed a little off. She complained of being tired after practice, dragging her feet up the stairs, skipping her morning runs. Jonathan chalked it up to stress, senior year, scholarship pressure, track meets, AP classes. She had always pushed herself harder than anyone else. Maybe this was her body telling her to slow down. But within weeks, things got worse. She began sleeping through her alarms, missing classes. Her once ravenous appetite vanished. One morning, Jonathan found her sitting on the bathroom floor, pale and shaking, struggling to keep down water. That was the moment he knew something was seriously wrong. He rushed her to the hospital in Raleigh, nearly 2 hours away, demanding answers. Blood tests, scans, more tests. Jonathan paced the sterile hallway while doctors moved around her, voices low and serious. The verdict came late that night, in a quiet consultation room with plastic chairs and a vending machine humming nearby. Layla's kidneys are failing, the doctor said gently. She has a rare condition that's progressed rapidly. If we don't act fast, she could lose full function within weeks. She'll need a transplant. Jonathan felt his world tilt sideways. He leaned forward, bracing himself on his knees, as if something invisible had punched him in the gut. A transplant, he repeated numbly. You mean an organ donor? Yes, preferably a relative. Siblings often have the best compatibility. Jonathan's mind shot to Jasmine and Sierra. He clung to that hope like a lifeline. We'll test them, he said, right away. They'd do anything for her. The next day, Jasmine and Sierra arrived at the hospital, both shaken but resolute. They didn't hesitate, didn't question. They signed the forms, gave their blood, and waited. Jonathan sat with them in the bland waiting room, white walls, flickering TV, the smell of disinfectant heavy in the air. The girls huddled beside him, both clutching paper cups of cold coffee, their hands trembling. I'm not scared, Jasmine said, more to herself than anyone. I'd give her anything, Sierra added quietly. Whatever it takes. Jonathan reached out, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. She's lucky to have you. A few hours later, the doctor returned, holding a clipboard, his expression unreadable. Mr. Hale, he began, can I speak with you privately? Jonathan stood, but Jasmine shook her head. No, we all want to hear it. The doctor hesitated. All right, the results are in. Neither Jasmine nor Sierra is a viable donor. But it's more than that. He glanced at his clipboard, then back at them. Genetically speaking, Jasmine and Sierra aren't related, not even distantly. Their markers are completely different. I'm sorry. I know this may come as a shock. Jonathan froze. His ears rang. The words hit like glass shattering on tile. Jasmine stared blankly at the floor. Sierra blinked, confused. What do you mean? She asked. We're sisters. The doctor looked between them, then at Jonathan. That's not for me to say. He left the room without another word. Silence fell like a thunderclap. Jonathan could feel the questions boiling behind their stunned faces. It was Jasmine who finally spoke. Dad, is it true? Jonathan's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His throat tightened. They were looking at him, his girls, his daughters, not with anger yet, but with disbelief. And he couldn't run from it anymore. He took a shaky breath. Yes, it's true. Their eyes widened. You knew? Sierra asked, voice rising. Jonathan nodded. When I adopted you, the agency told me your birth mother had multiple partners. There wasn't clear documentation. The files said you were sisters, but not definitively. I didn't know for sure, but I knew there was a chance. You knew, Jasmine said again, as if repeating it made it make more sense. And you didn't tell us. I didn't want to break what you had, Jonathan said, his voice cracking. You were babies. You needed each other. I wanted you to grow up loved, whole, not confused or broken. You lied to us, Sierra interrupted. Her face was hard, unfamiliar. You let us believe something that wasn't true. I protected you, Jonathan said quickly. I raised you as sisters because that's what you are, to me and to each other. But we're not, are we? Jasmine whispered. Jonathan felt tears sting his eyes. Blood doesn't define family. Love does. And I loved you enough to make you mine, all three of you. Sierra stood up. But we're not yours. Not really. The words gutted him. Before he could speak again, a nurse appeared at the door. Excuse me, we need to move quickly if we want to get Layla stabilized. I'm sorry, but we need to focus. The girls nodded stiffly. Jonathan followed them back to Layla's room in silence. She lay in bed, eyes half open, skin pale, lips dry, tubes connected to machines beat beside her. When she saw them, her mouth curved into a faint smile. Jasmine sat on one side, holding her hand. Sierra took the other. Jonathan stood at the foot of the bed, heart breaking. Layla didn't speak. She was too weak, but she squeezed their hands, and that small gesture undid them all. Jasmine bent forward, tears falling freely. We're here, Lay, she whispered. We're not going anywhere. In the days that followed, the house in Cedar Brook felt foreign. The girls returned home briefly, but the warmth was gone. Meals were quiet. Eye contact was rare. Jonathan tried to speak, but every attempt died in his throat. He caught Jasmine crying alone on the porch. He heard Sierra slam her door after a phone call. The trust he had spent years building had cracked, and Layla still needed a donor. Jonathan called every friend, every relative, everyone who might be a possible match. No one fit. Desperation clawed at him, and still, the girls remained in emotional limbo, grieving not just Layla's health, but the identity they thought they had. The sisterhood they had once worn like armor now felt paper thin. Then one night, as Jonathan sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by insurance forms and medical bills, his phone rang. A voice from his past. Hey, the man said. This is Daniel Hale, your cousin from Sacramento. We haven't talked in a while, but I heard what's happening. I want to help. Test me. Jonathan's hand trembled. Are you sure? I'm sure. It was the first sliver of hope in days. As Jonathan hung up, he looked toward the hallway where light peeked out from under Jasmine's door, where Sierra's headphones pulsed quietly with music. He didn't know if he could fix the damage, but he could still fight for the one thing that mattered most, his family. The hospital room felt colder than usual. The faint beeping of monitors tracked every heartbeat, every breath. Layla lay still, her face gaunt, eyes half-lidded, skin a shade too pale. Her once powerful legs, The same ones that had broken school records were now thin and motionless under the blanket. She looked so small, so unlike the girl who had once sprinted through the backyard like wind. Jonathan sat beside her, holding her hand, silently counting the seconds between the blips on the monitor. The last few days had been a blur of consultations, medications, and rising fear. Jasmine and Sierra visited often, but they didn't stay long. Their conversations were clipped, their eyes distant. Ever since the truth had come out, they'd been living like strangers in the same orbit. Then came the call. Daniel Hale, Jonathan's second cousin from California, had agreed to get tested. They hadn't spoken in years. They'd grown up together in Virginia, but lost touch after high school. Daniel was married now, with 2 kids, running a gym in Sacramento. When he heard through family channels what was happening, he didn't hesitate. "Tell me where to go," he'd said. "I'll fly out tomorrow." Jonathan met him at the airport personally, hugging him tightly before they even reached the baggage claim. Daniel was calm, easygoing, strong as ever. They drove straight to the hospital where Daniel submitted to testing. Then came another wait, 48 hours of unbearable silence. Jonathan didn't sleep. He paced hospital hallways, sat by Layla's bed, called Sierra and Jasmine with updates they barely responded to. Their silence hurt more than he expected, but he didn't blame them. They were grieving something invisible. When the results came in, the nephrologist called Jonathan into a private room. Daniel sat beside him. "She's lucky," the doctor said. "He's not a perfect match, but he's compatible enough for a partial transplant. It's risky, but it can save her." Jonathan felt his body sag with relief. "When can we do it?" "As soon as possible. We've got a narrow window." Daniel didn't flinch. "Schedule it. I'm ready." The surgery was set for the following morning. That night, Jonathan called Jasmine and Sierra. He didn't demand they come. He just told them the truth. "She's going in tomorrow. It might be rough, but she's strong, and she'd want you there." They arrived at dawn, eyes tired, clothes wrinkled from a sleepless night. Jasmine held a sketchbook in her lap, though she never opened it. Sierra wore Layla's old team hoodie. Jonathan didn't press them for conversation. He just sat in the waiting room with them, side by side, 3 statues waiting for news. The hours passed slowly. A nurse came out at one point to report things were progressing. Then more silence. Jonathan noticed Sierra shaking her leg uncontrollably. Jasmine kept twisting the hem of her sleeve. He wanted to say something, apologize again, ask them to talk. But the moment didn't come. Finally, a surgeon appeared in the doorway, mask down, hands clasped. "It was a success," she said simply. "The kidney took. She's stable. The next 72 hours are critical, but she's got a fighting chance." Jonathan let out a breath that didn't even feel like his. Jasmine broke down, burying her face in her hands. Sierra slumped forward, hands on her knees, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. Daniel was wheeled out shortly after, groggy and pale but grinning weakly. Jonathan gripped his hand tightly, overcome with gratitude. "You saved her," he whispered. Daniel chuckled. "She saved me too. I forgot what this kind of family feels like." In the following days, Layla remained in the ICU, but her vitals held steady. She opened her eyes more, started speaking in whispers, smiled when Jonathan made bad jokes. She gripped her sister's hands when they visited, even if they said little. It was Jasmine who finally broke the silence. One afternoon, as Layla dozed off, she turned to Jonathan, her voice low. "Do you think she knows?" Jonathan looked at her. "About the adoption?" Jasmine nodded. She always knew she was adopted, but not the rest. "No." Jasmine chewed her lip. "She's going to find out, eventually." "I know," he said. "And when she does, I want her to hear it from you, or from me, not from a test result or a stranger." Sierra stood behind them, arms folded. "So what do we even tell her? That her sisters aren't really her sisters?" "No," Jonathan said firmly. "You tell her the truth, that you're not sisters by blood, but you're sisters in every way that counts." Sierra frowned. "Does that even mean anything anymore?" "It has to," Jonathan said softly, Because if it doesn't, then what do we have left? The room fell into a heavy hush. Later that week, Layla was moved to a private room. She was awake longer now, sipping juice, eating crackers, regaining some color. But she noticed something was off. "You guys are acting weird," she mumbled one afternoon, squinting at her sisters. "Why are you always whispering outside the room?" Jasmine and Sierra exchanged glances. "I'm not stupid," Layla added, voice hoarse. "What's going on?" They hesitated. Then Jasmine sat at the edge of her bed and took her hand. "We found out something," she began. "When they tested us for compatibility, they realized me and Sierra aren't actually biologically related. Not even close." Layla blinked. "What?" Sierra stepped forward. "We're not sisters by blood." "But what about me?" Layla asked slowly. Jasmine shook her head. "We don't know. You might not be related to either of us." Layla looked at them both for a long moment. Then she exhaled softly. "So?" They both stared at her. "So what?" Jasmine asked. "So who cares?" Layla said, with the smallest smirk. "You think I ran those relays alone? You think I could have gone through this?" She gestured to the IV lines and monitors. "Without you two yelling at nurses and sneaking me snacks?" Sierra laughed unexpectedly. "You're insane." Layla smiled. "Yeah, but I'm your sister." Jonathan watched from the doorway. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. That moment, simple, imperfect, and full of truth, became the first step back to healing. Over the next week, things changed. Jasmine drew again, sketches of Layla in bed, smiling. Sierra brought her books and argued with doctors about medication, dosages. Jonathan cooked soup at home and then delivered it daily. No one said it out loud, but they all felt it. The cracks were still there, but the foundation was holding. And slowly, quietly, they began to rebuild. The sun was setting over Cedar Brook as the car pulled into the driveway of the Hale home. The familiar gravel crunched beneath the tires. In the passenger seat, Layla leaned against the window, tired but awake, watching the golden light stretch across the yard where she had once trained for track meets. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap, bandaged and thin, but her smile was real. Jonathan opened her door and helped her out slowly. She winced but managed to walk with small, cautious steps. Behind them, Jasmine and Sierra carried her bag and the pillows from the hospital bed. They didn't speak much. No one needed to. After everything that had happened, the diagnosis, the surgery, the revelations, there was comfort in just being together. Inside, the house was exactly as they'd left it. The couch still had a blanket tossed over the armrest. Layla's track medals still hung on the wall. A casserole dish sat warm in the oven, prepared by a neighbor. Everything felt familiar, yet not quite the same. Layla moved slowly down the hallway and into the bedroom that Jasmine and Sierra had prepared for her recovery. Clean sheets, soft lighting, her favorite books stacked neatly on the nightstand. She exhaled, easing down onto the bed, her fingers trailing over the comforter. Jonathan stood in the doorway, uncertain. "You need anything, sweetheart?" Layla shook her head. "Just this, being home." He nodded, then turned to leave, but she stopped him. "Dad?" He paused. "Thanks for not giving up." His throat tightened. "Never," he said quietly. "Not for a second." In the days that followed, the house took on a new rhythm. Slower, gentler. Layla slept a lot, but each day she stayed up longer. She ate more. She smiled more. When she was strong enough, Jasmine wheeled her outside in a chair, and they sat under the maple tree in the yard. Sierra read aloud from one of Layla's favorite novels, her voice steady, calm. Their conversations slowly grew deeper. The silence between them, once sharp, began to soften. One night after Layla had fallen asleep, Jasmine and Sierra sat with Jonathan in the living room. The air was warm, the window cracked open. Outside, crickets chirped. "I've been thinking," Jasmine said, staring into her mug of tea, "about everything, about who we are." Jonathan looked up, heart wary. "You were wrong," she continued. He flinched. "Wrong to hide it, but not wrong about us. I've been angry and hurt and confused, but I keep coming back to one thing. When I fell off my bike in third grade, you were the one who carried me home. When I failed that science test in eighth, you stayed up with me every night until I passed the next one. That's what I remember. Sierra nodded slowly. Same for me. It's just, the truth shook us, but it didn't break us. Jonathan swallowed hard. I never meant to lie. I just didn't want to see you question something so beautiful. I thought protecting you meant keeping you safe from the truth. Jasmine looked at him. But we're stronger than that. He nodded, tears brimming. You are. So much stronger. Sierra leaned forward. We want to know where we came from. Not because we're unhappy here, but because it's a part of us. Jonathan reached into the side drawer of the cabinet and pulled out a faded folder. He handed it to them with both hands. These are the original adoption files, what little there is. I've kept them, just in case. We can look together, if you want. They opened the folder in silence, flipping through documents, birth records, handwritten notes from social workers. So much of it was missing. Some pages were nearly illegible, but there were a few names, dates, locations, fragments of a story waiting to be pieced together. We'll figure it out, Sierra said, on our own time. Jasmine looked up. As a family. As weeks passed, Layla improved, slowly but surely. One afternoon, she insisted on walking through the backyard on her own. Jonathan hovered nearby, hands ready, but she pushed forward, each step a victory. Jasmine and Sierra cheered from the porch like they were at the Olympics. You're almost back, Sierra grinned. Better than back, Layla panted. I've got 2 sisters and a spare kidney. I'm basically a superhero now. That night, Jonathan made their favorite, chili and cornbread. The kitchen was loud with laughter and teasing, like it had been before. They played cards afterward, and Layla even won a round, declaring herself the undisputed family champion. Afterward, as the dishes were drying and the laughter faded into soft music, Jonathan stood up and cleared his throat. I need to say something. The girls looked up. I know I said it before, but I want you to hear it again. I'm sorry for hiding the truth, for thinking silence was the same as protection. I'll never do that again. From now on, no more secrets. You deserve honesty, and if you want to search for your roots, I'll help you, every step of the way. They didn't respond right away, but the look in their eyes, soft, trusting, was enough. Jasmine leaned her head on his shoulder. You're our dad. Nothing changes that. Layla, sleepy on the couch, mumbled, Yeah, we're stuck with you. Sierra smiled. Forever. Later that week, a package arrived in the mail. Inside was a custom-made wooden plaque. Carved into the grain were the words, Family isn't just blood. It's who stands beside you when the world breaks apart. Jonathan hung it on the living room wall, right above the family photos. Some were new, some old, all of them filled with real smiles. They still had questions, wounds that would take time to fully heal. But they were healing together, not as perfect people, not as a perfect family, but as one.